there, folks. My name is Emily.
And I'm Elf.
And we are Oh My Word, a podcast where we discuss movies, musicals, books, TV shows, etc. for content so that you are a more informed consumer.
Exactly. And then we put on our white lab coats and we pull out our microscopes and we have a small version of the Hubble telescope, and we use that to then analyze the content of what's in it for violence, language, and romance. We have a pearl clutching scale for 0 to 4, 0 being good because that means there's none, and 4 being, well, there's a lot of this, so think twice before consuming.
Correct. Trying to promote clean content. Clean and age appropriate, though clean is appropriate for any age, which is great.
Absolutely.
Today, we're actually continuing in a series which we began 2 weeks ago, and this is now our third week of it, talking about trends in young adult fiction. For those of you who weren't able yet, I say yet because I know you're planning to, listen to the first episode where we talked about trends. We went pretty deep into the concept of trends and where they come from and how they're formed. And as a reminder, Elt works. She's a writer in the young adult world, so she has an insight into newer trends and how publishing works, which is helpful in these conversations. So she is on top of the trends that we see, some of which are obvious. All you have to do is walk down an aisle in Barnes & Noble and you'll see the kind of books. So some of the trends are more obvious and some have been happening for longer. Some of them are newer. But anyway, we've been talking about these different trends just to see what's popular right now. What are publishers interested in publishing? What are writers writing? And what is in the zeitgeist?
Exactly. And a lot of it, especially the ones that we've been covering so far, are ones that the publishers have very specifically been looking for, agents and publishers. Part of that, I mean, there's so many different reasons to either try to create a trend or try to push a certain topic. Some of that is just like, we need to have more discussion about this. So we're going to publish more books about it. We're going to have more discussion about it. Some of it is we have to normalize this. Some of this is, we're not seeing people in this group are not seeing enough of themselves in literature. So we want to show them more of it, whatever that's going to be. So the trends, even though you're using language like trends are not specifically good or not good. You might not like a trend. You might be like, okay, enough with the vampires already, which we did that's kind of waned, right? We had a big Twilight craze of vampires, and now we don't see that as much anymore. And then some trends, they just become so entrenched, not only in publishing, but in the culture itself, or, they both influence each other, that it just becomes like a regular thing, that it's not necessarily a trend anymore, because it's automatic, and it's been normalized within publishing. Or within, in conversation, etc. So,
right.
So a lot of these ones are the ones that publishers are specifically looking for, which means that, they're making them trends so that they can become normalized within culture, within society. Some of these things sort of are already, there's a big push from it already, so it's kind of influencing each other. So this is just what it is. And then, you could decide if these are your books or if these are not your books, right? But you gotta pay attention
exactly.
Is the point. That's what we're all about. Just pay attention, have information, and then you can make you make good decisions, and you'll find you know how to look for what you want to find. We hope.
Exactly. So I think actually we're talking about two trends today, but one of the ones that we're talking about I think does fall into that category of it's been a trend for a long time. You could probably say it's not even a trend anymore. Just it's like its own category. Really.
Yes.
Right. It just is so common in young adult fiction. And that is the trend or category, genre, really whatever you want to call it at this point, of LGBTQ stories.
Yeah. Or queer. Just use the whole queer category.
Queer.
Yeah.
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 Queer stories, main characters, plot points, all of that.
Yes. And you can even look, we'll give you some book titles that you can look up so you can see that it's right here. We got this book called In Deeper Waters by F.T. Lukens. He wrote, So This Is Ever After. We sort of mentioned it last time. Also, F.T. Lukens. A lot of these are sort of retellings and remixes or this based on this sort of thing. But center of it, you'll see there's two guys romantically looking at each other. It's not a secret what's in this book.
Right.
You've got The Lesbiana's Guide to Catholic School, which kind of tells you right away what that one's about. That's Sonora Reyes wrote that. You've got Icebreaker by A.L. I don't know how to pronounce that. Graziade? I apologize if I mispronounced that. This is like two kids are on a hockey team and they're fighting for position, but maybe they're also fighting for each other's hearts. That you have Café con Leche by Emery Lee.
Lychee?
Lychee?
I think it's
it's like a fruit.
Yeah, I think.
And here you go. I Kissed Sarah Wheeler by Casey McQuiston. Now, here's the thing about the queer stuff. Originally, if you've been on YA long enough, if you've been reading YA long enough, you do see how, I would say, especially because it started becoming more of a conversation in the culture, you do see how it slowly started to get into the books, where now shelves are just dominated by it. You can walk into a bookstore and there's going to be a whole YA Pride section. Even though I don't really understand the breakdown of it, because sometimes I'll have a YA Pride section that's got maybe 4 or 5 or 6 or 8, 9, 10 shelves of books on it. Mm-hmm. And then if you actually know what's in other books, you could look at some of the ones in other categories and you're like, wait, I know that one's a queer book. I know that one's a queer book, but it's not necessarily on the YA Pride shelf. So I don't know if it's only contemporary makes it on the shelves or what, or it depends on the bookstore.
Interesting.
Yeah. So the biggest thing with it is that now the books that we mention, most of them, I don't remember, we just gave 5 or 6 titles. You'll see right away on the cover, most of them are actually 2 boys, like in a romantic position, kind of. But there's a lot with girls also, girl and girl also. Your biggest thing with this is, so again, if you look at it, you go back a couple of years, you see how they slowly sort of started putting it in. Secondary characters started having this, or you had siblings that started having it, and either it was just sort of mentioned, but it wasn't really focused on it. And then you slowly saw how books started actually to focus on it, or to set up a scene where it would have to be spoken about. So instead of just kind of like throwing it out on the side, like, oh, it looked like my sister was really into whatever this girl, it started like, she went to her sister, or I was like, are you really into this girl? Or so I caught my sister doing whatever with this girl. And then there was always this, it was a very brief time, but there was this conversation of, oh, do you mind? And then the answer was also, no, of course I don't mind. I just want you to be happy. Which, whatever someone feels about the queer, having queer and whatever, I don't know why they never put in the conversation of, oh, do you mind? And I was like, you know what? I have to think about this instead of an automatically, oh, I'm so happy. Because part of what they're doing is they're trying to give you the answer to respond to that situation, but they're also not acknowledging that people will have different answers. And then that doesn't create conversation. That just dictates what you're supposed to say. I don't know. So people can have their own thoughts about that, but that's kind of how I took that. And then now you're at the point where it's not just that this is the, it was sort of mentioned in a secondary characters. Now it's the main characters that have this, and it's right there on the cover. So all the ones that are on the covers, they're much more recent books. By the way, the queer category also will include trans, because I remember a few years ago when I saw a book, I think it was something called If I Was Your Girl or something like that. It's a boy who, said, oh, I'm a girl. And I remember when I saw that, I was like, wow, that's unusual. Like, it was different then. If I would see that book on the shelf now, I'd be like, oh, there's another one. Like, oh, of course they're putting it out now. Right. It wouldn't have drawn my attention the way that it did then. So it's actually a very small gap of time that this transition kind of occurred, where it used to be a side thing and now it's an actual main thing.
That's interesting how quickly that happens. I like your point about the canned answer of, oh yeah, I'm fine with it as long as you're happy, because you see that a lot in books, or not, you see it in books, but you see it in movies and TV shows too. And it's interesting because it seems like it could lend to an interesting character development, right? There could be some conflict between the two people. And not that has to be the source of the conflict if the movie's about something else. But then if the movie's about something else, it's like they're almost going to make it interesting and then they don't make it interesting.
Right.
A lot of times by asking someone how they feel about something.
Right. Well, I really don't like the way it ignores the fact that the answer is not so simple for people. And kind of what that does is it shuts down the fact that it's not simple for people. Because, oh, if it's not so simple for you to answer like this automatically, then you're wrong. Well, that doesn't prove anything. That just shows that you shut someone down.
And then people don't learn what a conversation like that could look like from both sides, right? From someone who says, this is a little bit strange for me, but I'm your friend, so let's talk about it. And the person who says, oh, I didn't realize that this would be strange for you. Okay, let me figure out how I can still be your friend. You're right. All right, here we go.
Yeah. And
move on.
It's kind of ironic also because, especially with the trans, that they're trying to do away with this binary system. Right? Saying, oh, there's not only male or female. There's not male, not female, and somewhere in between. But part of what they do is that if you say, oh, let's say I don't want queer fiction, they're like, oh, you're a hater. And it's like, no, I'm not a hater. This just doesn't appeal to me. Right? If I say that about fantasy, you have no problem with that. You're like, well, fantasy is not for everyone. If I say that about vampires, oh, that's not for everyone. I can say that about contemporary fiction. I can say that about sci-fi. I can say that about anything. Oh, it's not for everyone. But if it comes to this, you're like, oh, hater. Like, there's a lot of gradations between look, I don't know how to deal with this right now, and like burning a cross on someone's lawn. That,
right.
or stringing someone up. It's not that, and again, part of the shutting down of that is just the denial of that whole gray area in between, of saying, okay, you might be struggling with this, but we must all be respectful toward each other, sort of thing, right? You might whatever, but don't bully someone. I think that's a much easier thing for even someone who's struggling, or someone who it doesn't fully click for them. You could say, okay, if you have something that's wrong with someone's personality, hey, it's really annoying when you do that. You're like, fine, don't bully them. Okay, we can all agree, don't bully someone. That is not a good thing. So that's why when it doesn't allow for the gradations, it creates a binary system. So it's kind of ironic how that kind of occurs.
That's interesting.
I just gotta say one more thing about it, and this I've actually seen from other readers, is that often you'll see that a series that was started, let's say 5 or 6 years ago, or whenever it was, you'll see a series that started, a trilogy, a duology, whatever it is, or a book that for a long time they wait for the follow-up of it. It starts off in a certain way. You have 1 or 2 books that go in one direction. Then all of a sudden in the third book, they'll bring in like the queer character. And oftentimes there's a lot of readers that will say, look, you do whatever you want in your writing, but don't try to shoehorn and like tokenize us, right? Yeah. This stuff doesn't make sense. There was no reason for it. And I remember there was one book that I was very confused by, because I read the first book and it was great. And I read the second book. There was a guy in the book, and the whole first book, he had this crush on a girl, right? Oh, and how am I supposed to deal with this? Because he's totally crushing on me and blah, 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 whatever. In the second book, it switches POV. It has different POVs. And all of a sudden, this other guy comes and kisses this guy, which I don't know why he thought like that was a thing to do, like, because it didn't seem to be any signal or invitation for it. So, how is that not harassment or something? He goes, he kisses him, and all of a sudden this guy's now gay. And it was like, that is so dishonest to, like, what? And I don't know, like, readers, again, I don't care. Writers, you write whatever you want. That's the point of free speech, is that everyone can write whatever they want. But don't be logically dishonest in what you're presenting. And for me personally, I really just don't like tokenism. It's just, if someone's there, put them there with purpose, and don't just put them there because they're trying to check boxes off. That's not respectful either.
No, I agree with you. It's just as possibly more disrespectful than not including it at all, because that's not the story you're telling. If you're just putting someone in there because they're that, it's like, oh, this is all that person has to offer. Hooray.
Right. You see that from a lot of sides of like, stop pretending like this is all there is that only whether or not a girl likes a girl, a boy likes a boy. Like, there's something, there's like a bazillion other things to that personality. Do they like art? Do they sing? Do they read? Do they skate? Right. What is it? This is it? Like, what a shallow character. And it's true that part of the tokenism leads to shallowness of okay, I put it in there, I check the box, and then, yeah, but your character has no depth to them. So why do you think that doesn't help the cause, whatever cause or trend you're trying to push? It doesn't help it either when there's no depth to what you're doing. And eventually readers they're not gonna, I think, but it could not be true, but I think readers eventually will reject that, because readers do want depth. They want something that there's logic to it. They want something that's, not just like, oh, look, we checked all the boxes. And even though, I don't know, maybe some readers like that.
Well, maybe that explains the trend in the queer characters going from sidekicks and friends, or side characters, to the main character, because you're right, in a lot of when they were just the friends or the side character, and then there'd be a moment like, oh, and my friend's gay, and then they'd move on, just so that, yep, tick the box, gay friend.
Yeah, exactly.
But they didn't really have any substance, right? So now maybe making them the main characters, like, no, these are people, yes, I mean, it's like they're getting there, because a lot of these books is still about them being gay, but they're the main characters, so I guess the next step is they just are, but what we're talking about is their struggle with their mother-in-law, or how they're coping with, their job, right? Like it's one thing, it's part of their personality, sure, but it's not actually the central focus, because I would hope that someone who's queer is more complex than that thing, just like I would hope someone who's straight is more complex than just that one thing, which is why, if you think of like romantic comedies when it comes to books and movies, but since we're talking about books, the ones that are more interesting are the ones where the characters are more fully fleshed out, right? As opposed to just a cookie cutter. We could put in any man or woman in here because it's just a basic rom-com.
Right.
So interesting characters are interesting characters. Doesn't really matter anything else about them, right?
Right. Well, you're also, if you want to try to say like, all people have similarities, or all people, we have so much in common. You're not going to show that if you don't show other parts of the character. Again, do they like to sing? Well, I like to sing. Okay, we can be in a choir together, or whatever it is. It just, who knows? Like, who knows where we'll go, even though I think it's basically just going to become a regular part. YA is definitely, as much as people, we have to show more representation, we have to show whatever. The push in YA has been very, very strong, and it's everywhere in YA. You can pick up any random book that, even though it's about, the main love interest might be a guy and a girl, they're going to throw in somewhere. The sister is going to casually mention a girlfriend. She's going to say, oh, I went to the baker and her wife was there. It's going to be there. It's everywhere. In YA, it's everywhere. You're going to have to look you have to look a little bit deeper if this is not your thing and you want to find something else that doesn't have it in it. But I don't know. It's kind of like what we said last time, the way that so many YA authors are women. So, writing strong female characters should be an automatic thing. This is, I think you're getting this a lot in YA also. I don't know that there's a battle here anymore. They've pushed it so strongly that I think it's it. I mean, it seems like it's entrenched at this point. Who knows what's going to be, but they worked very hard to make it standard and normalized in YA, and I think they succeeded in that.
Yeah. So that's one trend that we're noticing. And then the other one is interesting because in a way it's a trend. It's a very visual trend, though I guess it probably comes up in the stories as well. But we're all told not to judge a book by its cover. But in this case, we're absolutely basing this trend, well, at least from my perspective, Elle probably has a little bit more insight, but based off the covers and talking about representation of what, body positivity?
Yeah.
Larger people. I don't know what exactly
this one you could definitely see this one aligning with the cultural push of the body positivity of, love each person in whatever size they come in sort of thing. Here's the one thing. Growing up, I remember when the ideal was to be so skinny that one of the biggest problems was like anorexia and bulimia. So, because everyone was trying, so I don't know if those are still as prevalent, those issues are as prevalent with teenagers anymore. I'm sure there are still teenagers who deal with that, just because teenagers in general have a lot of body issues in the sense that they're so uncomfortable in their skin because their body's growing, their minds are growing, and they don't know how to put all the pieces together. But we don't hear, I don't know if we're not hearing about it as much because it's not as much of a thing, or just because they've moved on to something else. So,
or because we're not teenagers anymore.
Yeah, well, that could be. But no, so on the one hand, it is good if the body positivity sort of thing moved us a little bit away from anorexia. You don't have to be stick skinny, but I think we see that also when people talk about fitness and health, they're not looking at the you're still having the models and the actresses or whatever are still super, super skinny. But I think we moved away to start using language of like being healthy, or, we're looking at more like thin or slim versus skinny. Which is also more healthy, because you see the people that are so anorexic and bulimic, that's not healthy. It doesn't matter how skinny you are not healthy right now.
Right.
So you have that also, even though the body positivity, I guess there's a whole other thing, because then people get upset about how, if somebody's morbidly obese, you got to get them to a healthy place, because morbid, that word tells you, morbidly obese tells you this is a dangerous size. But you can see, even also, you see this right on the covers, that you see the people that they're putting on the covers are not like skinny looking. They actually look like they've been fleshed out a little bit. So sometimes you see it actually bigger, and sometimes they just look medium.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it looks kind of, regular almost. Like, I would see that person in the street, and they would just be a person I saw on the street, not someone who I would necessarily, so skinny, or wow, that's a big person. Like, it just looks regular at this point.
Right. It probably also goes along with what we were talking about in previous weeks about representation of different cultures, because in different cultures, or different ethnicities, depending on where you come from in the globe, your body's going to be a little bit different.
That's true.
So because we're seeing a different type of person on the cover in terms of ethnicity, I think we're also seeing a little bit of a different type of person in terms of body shape and body type, because those two things go together.
Yeah.
Like if we for some reason we don't, but if there was a push for like Swedish authors and Swedish culture, we'd get a bunch of really tall people on the covers, right? They'd all be
Vikings, yeah.
Yeah. But we're getting the push right now, like the few that we've mentioned. So actually I'll give the names while we talk about them. So we have No Filter and Other Lies by Crystal Maldonado, Fat Chance Charlie Vega, also by Crystal Maldonado.
Oh, there you go.
And When You Get the Chance by Emma Lord. Now that one, maybe, it's hard to tell actually by the character, but the other two seem to be Hispanic. Well, I mean, the author, Maldonado, it's Hispanic. So that's a different look, right? Because your body does different kind of hair, different body shape. So it's kind of going to go together. Yeah.
Well, that's also, I remember I heard this thing once, like in Hawaii, part of the challenge that they have in the medical community especially with Native Hawaiians, is that for so long in the Hawaiian culture, being very fat was considered beautiful. Well, I mean, we have that in Europe also, but it's something that among Native Hawaiians, the heavier you are, that's beauty. Right. And a lot of the medical community was having a hard time saying, if you get to a certain weight, you got to come in for a checkup to make sure you're healthy, or you got to come in to make sure you're not getting diabetes or something like that. It might even still be going on, but it's like teaching a new mindset of, you got to take care of yourself, you got to watch yourself, because, then you'll have a better quality of life, or, that way we could treat if something comes up or something like that. It is very culturally. It's not just a matter of like, oh, we have to love everybody as they are and we can't tell anybody to go on a diet and no body shaming. But it is definitely very culturally relevant. And I remember I was on a subway once in New York and someone was reading, I think it was kind of like a hip hop magazine, or it seemed like a magazine that was aimed toward the Black community. And the reason for that is because on the ad in the back, it was like an ad for jeans, and it was showing like a wider hip, like wider bottom jeans. And it wasn't like, oh, if you're too big, wear these jeans. It was just like, hey, check out the jeans kind of thing. Because it is I'm not going to paint a broad brush, but it is often a thing that, especially in certain communities, being bottom heavy or having, I guess you could just say a big butt is considered also something that that's attractive, right? Right. For some people, yes, and some people no, but that is definitely something that different cultures will have obviously different standards of beauty, different things that the men of those cultures are attracted to. It's a little stereotypical, but it's not without basis.
Right. And I'm always have a little bit of two minds with the whole body positivity thing, we haven't read these books yet. We're just looking at trends, so we haven't looked into the books deeply. But I could see sort of like what you were talking about with the anorexia thing being an issue for teens. I could see books for teenagers talking about accepting your body, or at least not feeling like you have to fit into a certain mold,
right.
Being healthy for teenagers. I mean, I think you could even say that, with certain kinds of hair or wearing glasses or wearing braces, it doesn't even have to be just about, I think body positivity often or maybe always is about weight, but when you're a teen, you're not just thinking about your weight, you're thinking about everything that's going on, how you dress, and again, glasses, braces, do you wear earrings? Do you wear sneakers? Do you wear flats? Like there's so many different things. So there could actually be a positivity in teens reading books about people who look a little bit different from everyone else around them and, accept it. Or at least, even if you don't want to accept, it's okay to want to, get more fit or be in shape. You could be thin, but still be in bad shape. So,
right.
Health is kind of a separate thing, but to at least read about other people and be like, oh, you know what? I'm 16. My body's changing and it's going to continue changing. So it's okay that I feel a little bit uncomfortable and weird right now, and that I look at everyone else and see super skinny girls, but it could be that they're also feeling uncomfortable because they feel like they're too skinny. Their boobs aren't big enough, or they're not tall enough. Their hair is too blonde. Like everyone actually has something that they're insecure about. So this could be a good trend.
Right.
Depending upon how they deal with the subject.
Well, for me, there's two big things about it. One is that because the body changes so much as a teenager, it probably is good to take away the focus from your body must look like this, because your body's, I know someone who, in high school, she was on like every diet possible. And then when she was out of high school, her body kind of like stabilized, and she's, became like a thinner body after that because of all the changes. And some people are very chunky as kids and they slim down as teenagers. And some people are kind of chunky as teenagers and they kind of slim down after that. Again, because the body's changing. So it is good, I think, to kind of draw the attention away from the size of the body, but only if there's also an emphasis on promoting, I think, an active lifestyle. As in, you don't have to be an athlete, you don't have to be whatever, but you got to be someone who can walk a mile without getting out of breath. You got to be able to run up the steps without getting out of breath. and I don't want to say in those specific terms because not to set a standard, but like, hey, let's go on a walk right now. That is good for us to go outside and get fresh air. But you also want teenagers. If not, they're going to sit on their phone the whole day. They're going to sit playing games the whole day. Right. So I think that if that's there of like, okay, look, right now your body's changing. So, you know, it's going to go through different things. But what we can do is we can make sure that we're keeping it healthy. We got to keep our muscles moving. You know, we're not made for sitting all day and doing nothing. So let's go outside a little bit. Let's go on a hike somewhere. It's okay if it's not super intense. We don't have to race everything, you know, or let's go on a rowboat if you like rowboating, if you want to go on a bike ride. I think that is that's for me, I would like to see it come along with that, especially because someone can be skinny and be like 95% fat if they have no muscle. So, you know, I think just promoting just basic movement, I guess you could say, not a healthy life, but you can say active lifestyle, but also just healthy movement, I think is a good thing to make sure it aligns with that, you know, because I think that you have to go hand in hand. You got to keep, your body's got to move to stay healthy. So who knows what we'll see, because now it's a few books that are starting to have this, but even as the conversation is becoming more, according to what kind of resistance it faces, we'll see where it goes. Right.
So that's our trends discussion for this week. We talked about queer trend, or really at this point, queer genre, practically. And then this trend of more body positivity on the covers, but then also as central to the story, characters who are grappling with their bodies, with being fat, right? I mean, being so far the ones we've seen, right. But we're not seeing girls who are too skinny dreaming of being bigger. At this point, the books are about girls who are big dealing with being big.
Yeah. So if you remember Dumpling, we spoke about Dumpling.
Oh, yeah. So, thanks for coming along with us on this ride through trends. It's something new, but it's exciting to try something new and also to be on top of what's happening in the YA world, which is really our focus on this podcast. Even though we talk about other genres, we really always come back to YA books especially. So we hope you enjoyed, and we'll do this again, right?
Yeah, well, we'll keep our finger to the wind and we'll see what comes up. We'll keep monitoring with our small Hubble telescope. We'll keep monitoring.
Yes, and we'll keep you informed as we always do, because that's what we're about, keeping you informed. So thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you next time.
Cheers, peoples! Oh My Word podcast is brought to you by the pearl-clutching basement dwellers at Oh My Word. Follow us on Instagram for updates at Oh My Word Podcast, or like and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. For full episode notes and details, visit eltenenbaum.com. Music is by Tim Berg. See you next time.